Is inflation good for the economy? The argument about inflation being good for the economy or not is and has always been a widely debated topic among economists, businessmen, and politicians. But to truly understand its concept, you must first imagine inflation as a bustling marketplace where prices are constantly shifting. Inflation is a critical factor in the economy, with many maintaining that moderate inflation levels are needed to drive consumption, assuming that higher levels of spending are crucial for economic growth. But is this really so? Let's find out here as we explore the impacts of inflation, weighing its advantages and disadvantages. Understanding inflation. To truly grasp the impact of inflation on the economy, it is essential to delve deeper into its causes and mechanisms. Inflation is not a standalone phenomenon, but rather a reflection of underlying economic dynamics, and analyzing data and research can provide valuable insights. One of the primary drivers of inflation is excess demand relative to supply, leading to demand-pull inflation. Research conducted by economists has shown that sustained increases in consumer spending, coupled with limited production capacities, can lead to inflationary pressures. For example, a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco found that increased consumer spending accounted for a significant portion of inflationary pressures during certain periods. Another factor contributing to inflation is rising production costs, known as cost-push inflation. Research has shown that changes in input prices, such as wages and raw materials, can have a direct impact on inflation. For instance, a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that higher wages in certain industries resulted in increased production costs, which were then passed on to consumers through higher prices. Monetary factors can also influence inflation. The expansion or contraction of the money supply by central banks can impact inflation rates. When there is an excessive increase in the money supply without a corresponding increase in the production of goods and services, more money chases a limited supply of goods, leading to inflation. On the other hand, a contraction in the money supply can have a deflationary effect, causing prices to decrease. Additionally, inflation can be influenced by external shocks, such as natural disasters, geopolitical events, or changes in global commodity prices. These external factors can disrupt supply chains, leading to supply shortages or increased costs, thereby affecting price levels. For example, a study published in the Journal of Money, Credit, and Banking examined the relationship between oil price shocks and inflation, finding that oil price increases tend to have a positive effect on inflation. Positive effects of inflation. Inflation, when kept within reasonable bounds, can serve as a powerful tool to invigorate economic activity. Firstly, inflation acts as a stimulus for spending and investment. Imagine inflation as a gentle nudge that encourages consumers to make purchases sooner rather than later. As prices gradually rise, the motivation to acquire goods and services intensifies. This increased spending in turn drives up demand, leading businesses to expand their operations to meet the growing needs of consumers. The resulting surge in production creates new job opportunities and stimulates economic growth. It's a virtuous cycle where inflation acts as a catalyst, propelling the economy forward. Furthermore, inflation can incentivize borrowing and lending. When the value of money decreases over time, individuals and businesses are encouraged to borrow and invest in assets that appreciate. By facilitating borrowing and investment, inflation encourages the flow of capital, which supports entrepreneurial endeavors, stimulates innovation, and fosters economic progress. Additionally, inflation can have a positive impact on wage growth. As prices rise, businesses are compelled to adjust wages to ensure that employees can maintain their purchasing power. This dynamic interaction between inflation and wages creates an environment where workers' incomes keep pace with the cost of living. Higher wages not only improve the standard of living for individuals and their families, but also drive consumer spending, which further fuels economic growth. However, it's important to note that these positive effects of inflation are contingent upon moderate and well-managed inflation rates. When inflation remains within a reasonable range, typically targeted by central banks, it can act as a vital tool for economic stimulation and prosperity. Furthermore, historical data and statistics provide empirical evidence of the positive correlation between inflation and economic growth. Studies have shown that countries with moderate inflation rates often experience higher GDP growth, increased investment, and improved living standards. Negative impacts of inflation. Now, while we have explored some of the positive aspects of inflation, we must acknowledge the potential negative effects that can arise when inflation runs rampant. One of the most significant concerns with inflation is its impact on individuals with fixed incomes or those relying on pensions and savings. Imagine a retiree who carefully planned for their future, only to find that rising prices are eroding their hard-earned savings. This can lead to a significant decline in their purchasing power and a compromised standard of living. Additionally, inflation can create a sense of economic instability and unpredictability. When prices rise rapidly, businesses and consumers alike find it challenging to plan for the future. Companies hesitate to make long-term investment decisions or expand their operations due to the uncertain economic environment. This cautious approach can hinder economic growth and job creation, impacting the overall prosperity of a nation. Furthermore, inflation can distort the allocation of resources within an economy. As prices rise, consumers may alter their spending patterns, focusing more on essential goods and cutting back on discretionary purchases. This shift in consumer behavior can have adverse effects on businesses that rely on non-essential products or services. Inflation can also create a sense of injustice in income distribution. As prices rise, individuals who do not have access to inflation-adjusted wages may experience a decline in their real income. This can exacerbate income inequality and social disparities, leading to societal unrest and economic imbalances. Hence, while a moderate level of inflation is often considered beneficial for the economy, it is crucial to monitor and manage it effectively to prevent it from spiraling out of control. By employing appropriate monetary policies and maintaining price stability, policymakers can mitigate the negative effects of inflation and foster a conducive economic environment. The role of central banks. Central banks, in this case, are very vital as they play a pivotal role in managing inflation and maintaining economic stability through their monetary policy decisions. Central banks, like the captains of the ship, possess an array of tools at their disposal. One of their primary tools is interest rates. By adjusting interest rates, central banks can influence borrowing costs for businesses and consumers. When inflation rises, central banks may choose to raise interest rates to cool down economic activity and reduce spending. Conversely, if inflation remains low or the economy needs a boost, central banks may lower interest rates to encourage borrowing, investment, and consumption. Beyond interest rates, central banks also utilize open market operations. This involves buying or selling government securities to control the money supply in the economy. By purchasing securities, central banks inject money into the system, stimulating economic activity. They also serve as the lenders of last resort, extending liquidity to troubled banks during times of financial stress. This ensures the stability of the financial system and prevents widespread panic. By acting as a backstop, central banks instill confidence in the economy, promoting the smooth functioning of the banking sector. Notable case studies. To truly grasp the real-world impact of inflation, let's delve into a few notable case studies that illuminate its consequences on economies and societies. 1. The 1970s oil crisis. In the 1970s, the world experienced a seismic shift as oil prices skyrocketed due to geopolitical tensions. This oil crisis had a profound effect on inflation rates in many countries. Initially, the surge in oil prices propelled overall inflation, as it directly impacted production costs and transportation expenses. Consequently, the prices of goods and services surged, and inflation soared. The aftermath of the oil crisis, however, revealed the downside of unchecked inflation. As inflation rates reached double digits, economic growth stagnated, unemployment rose, and businesses struggled to adapt. Individuals faced higher prices for basic necessities, eroding their purchasing power. The lesson learned from this case study is that high and sustained inflation can wreak havoc on economies, causing economic downturns and societal challenges. 2. Hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe serves as a stark example of the devastating effects of hyperinflation. In the late 2000s, the country experienced an unprecedented economic collapse, marked by hyperinflation rates reaching astronomical levels. Prices skyrocketed at an astonishing pace, with people needing wheelbarrows full of cash to buy everyday goods. The Zimbabwean dollar rapidly lost its value, rendering it practically worthless. The consequences of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe were catastrophic. The economy spiraled into chaos. Businesses collapsed, unemployment surged, and poverty became rampant. The social fabric of the country suffered, leading to widespread economic and political instability. This extreme case underscores the importance of prudent monetary management to prevent inflation from spiraling out of control. So, is inflation a friend or foe? It's a nuanced question with no simple answer. The impact of inflation depends on factors such as its level, duration, and management. A moderate dose of inflation can breathe life into economic growth, driving spending, investment, and wage increases. However, when inflation gallops too swiftly, it can trample the purchasing power of individuals and sow seeds of uncertainty. Hence, policymakers must exercise vigilance in managing inflation to promote a healthy and prosperous economy for all.